It is undeniably the crown jewel in the SA Cross Country Series, mainly due to the toughness and length of the event. But this year's Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race proved even tougher than most. And one thing is certain, nobody will forget the 2018 edition of Africa's most grueling automotive event in a hurry. All the action is brought to you by Total Exilium, Ford, and of course, Toyota. So we've reached the halfway marker of the season, which means we're here at round number 3 of the Championship Racing Series, Jwaneng and the Toyota Desert 1000, an iconic race that everyone wants to compete in and even more want to win. We've got 46 of the very best crews in South Africa that have made the trip across the border, and everyone wants to walk away with the title. The SACCS's annual pilgrimage to the southern Botswana town of Jwaneng marks a turning point in the season. If not in terms of numbers of races, then certainly when it comes to championship points. With double points on offer, the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race has often proven pivotal in the championship chase, and this year would be no different. As has been the case for the last 4 years, this year's DSP and Race HQ was set up at the Jwaneng Sports Grounds, just to the north of the town. This year again saw the bike crews join the SACCS in the desert, and as a result, the DSP was a hive of activity throughout the weekend. There was also an air of anticipation amongst the competitors, as the desert is not a playground and anything could happen. Winning here has traditionally offered crews an opportunity to either cement their championship lead or play catch-up if they were lagging behind. But winning in Botswana isn't easy, as we heard from 6-time race-winning co-driver Richard Leek.
It's a four-way combination. It's obviously the car, it's the crew who are prepping it and keeping it going, and of course the driver and the co-driver. First of all, they don't work together and talk to each other and make 4 eyes looking through the windscreen and not just 2, you don't win this race.
The race is also extremely popular with the current crop of competitors, and they were itching to get the event underway.
Every year we come here, it's just so exciting to have 1000 k's, which is similar in 1 day of Dakar, where you do over 3.
The local people are wonderful, the thousands of people, when you get to all the tar road crossings, I mean, there's thousands of people there.
There's a lot of open spaces, you can really get into the high top speeds and everything. Yeah?
The desert is tough, rough, crowd crazy.
It's just the sheer distance and also the terrain. It just becomes so taxing on the body.
You know, you're doing 140, 150 kilometers an hour on top of the sand. You've got trees coming from you at all angles.
It's the hours in car and the heat.
There's a lot of cattle on the route here. Very bumpy.
I think it's a mental thing, you know. I think you gotta keep your head cool.
You drive it today, you drive it Saturday, you race it home on Sunday to win.
But before we get into the action in the desert, let's take a moment to see how things stacked up in the various classes going into this epic battle. In the special vehicle category, it was 4x4 MegaWorld's Kutsia Labuskakny who topped the driver standings, just 1 point ahead of Nick Gosler in his Class P Zarko Magnum. Stefan Van Pletzen and Andre Voigt were tied on 30 points, just 5 points adrift, whilst John Telford rounded out the top 5 in his Bat Warbird. Over in the production category, it was Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Janelle de Villiers who had stolen an early march on the championship, with teammate Henk Lautigan in second place. Atlas Copco's Chris Visser was in third, with Mark Corbett in fourth. 4x4 MegaWorld ARB's Jason Fenter held fifth place, with Redline Motorsports' Luke Berta the last of this season's point scorers to date. Class T was the domain of Ford NWM's Lance Woolridge, who had a healthy buffer over Malalan Toyota's Johan Horn in second place. Despite a DNF on the opening round, Atlas Copco's Gary Berthold was still in third, with Richard Leek in the BMW holding on to fourth. It was Roman Besadenhout who had fifth place. To date, the battle in Class S has been a 2-horse race, with Archie Rutherford taking a 10-point lead over David Huddy after the first 2 rounds. So those were the numbers before the start of the desert. But anything could and certainly would happen out in the wilderness surrounding Jwaneng. We caught up with some of the key players before Friday's qualifying race. The man at the very top of the pile throughout the season to date has been Giniel de Villiers, and the former Dakar winner had every reason to be confident going into the desert.
Yeah, so far so good. But we all know the desert race is very long. Anything can happen here.
For Class T Championship leader Lance Woolridge, the desert was going to be all about the points rather than the glory.
Third place points are better than no points for sure. We've got to start thinking about the championship. We've got a nice margin at the moment.
Ford NWM teammate and brother Gareth Woolridge had a rough start to the season, but was looking forward to bagging some meaningful points in Botswana.
I've made faults, it's all been my side this year, unfortunately. But this race I want to try and consolidate, get some points. Obviously I'd like to win, but that'll be a bonus.
Over on the special vehicle side of things, 4x4 Mega World's Coetzee Labuschagne was the man with a slender lead. But the veteran racer had a plan of action for the upcoming event.
There's a lot of tough guys. I mean, Lance, who is there, we got the unknown factor with the Bradbury coming with Evans' ex-car.
As Labuschagne mentioned, however, a stern challenge was sure to come from Big Lance Trathui, because even though he failed to convert his pace into points on the previous round, the Bat Venom driver has never had a shortage of skill or speed.
Go fast in the time trial, get a good starting position for tomorrow, and then obviously race hard, because I think that all the other guys are coming and it's going to be a good race.
There were a number of other stories and competitors to chat to in the DSP before the qualifying race, and we managed to catch up with some of them. One of the men to keep an eye on in this Botswana event was Brian Baragwanath. The former quad racer had shown that he was more than capable of winning races when he set some amazing times during the Dundee 400. But the desert is a different story.
What a machine, it accelerates like hell with the big tyres at the back, the two-wheel drive, really just the weight distribution of the car, the handling, the suspension through the rough is a very, very good car. So I'm very excited to see what we can do.
We asked 2011 desert race winner Chris Visser what it takes to win in Botswana, and also what his plan was for this race.
In first place, you must have the right car and the right team behind you, and I think we've got a very good car, very good team, and we're looking forward to this race.
Another former winner also gave us his thoughts, together with his plan for tackling the desert race in a four-wheel drive vehicle for the first time. Shamir Variawa won the race 3 times on the trot in 2008, 9 and 10, so he knew exactly what he was in for.
First time we're driving it in a four-wheel drive, so we normally drove this race in a two-wheel drive special, and four-wheel drive today we'll see.
Gary Berthold's Volkswagen Amarok burnt to the ground in this race last year, but the Atlas Copco driver was back in Jwaneng, now behind the wheel of a Class T Toyota Hilux, and was upbeat about taking on the desert once more.
I think first of all, just to be here is an absolute privilege, and I don't disregard that for 1 minute. Very grateful. Also, to be in this Atlas Copco Hilux, I've got to tell you, it's the business.
But enough about the talking in the pits. Let's get into the action, starting with the qualifying race, held on the Friday of the race weekend. This race was run over only 48 kilometers and was used to determine the starting position for the main race. With a modest length of less than 50 kilometers though, the qualifier didn't pose too many challenges. But then this is the desert race, and counting on anything before the dust settles is usually a major mistake. In a sense, we've come to expect the factory Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux race vehicles to rise to the top at every race. But as de Villiers said earlier, winning your sponsor's event is usually a tough task, so setting a good time during qualifying was critical. And that's exactly what Giniel de Villiers and Dennis Murphy did, when they posted a time of 28 minutes and 40 seconds over the 48-kilometer quali. Just how good a time it was only became clear when teammates Henk Latergan and Barry White in an identical machine arrived back in the DSP 1 minute and 2 seconds slower than de Villiers. So the experienced Dakar campaigner seemed to have it all in hand. But then came Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer in their Century Racing built CR6 buggy. Racing in Class FIA, the pair pipped de Villiers and Murphy by a fraction of a second. But in the SACCS, times are adjusted to the nearest full second, and since de Villiers posted the time first, he was credited with the win. But even so, the two crews had already delivered an amazing race, with more than 900 kilometres still to come.
The car is fantastic. It's such a good car. Century Racing are really onto something. They've got some fantastic technology, and Julian, the main engineer, is one of the smartest guys I know. I think the things he comes up with on these cars is phenomenal.
You know, the two-wheel drive cars are very quick here. We had long straights for very long periods of time, and they have a higher top speed. So, you know, I expect tomorrow to be okay. It's going to be a bit more twisty.
Let's spend a moment in car with de Villiers just to see what it takes to perform at this level. Just behind the three leaders followed the first of the Class T cars. This one in the hands of Ford NWM's Woolridge and Huxtable. The pair drove their Ford Ranger with precision, setting a time just a single second slower than that posted by Larachan and White.
I think it's going to be tighter tomorrow, definitely in the bush. So yeah, we definitely didn't want to be opening. I think we'll look at the results, 4th, 5th on the road, which I'm just where I wanted to be. So yeah, pretty happy.
Variawa and Bedonia were certainly getting the most out of their Redline Motorsport Nissan Navara, especially considering that they are fairly new to the world of four-wheel drive. The pair went 5th fastest on the opening loop, with only 6 seconds separating them from the car ahead. Visser and Hurselman were 6th fastest in their Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux, with 4x4 Megaworld ARB's Fenter and Van Aert just 9 seconds further back. Bert Holden Minute in a Class T Toyota Hilux posted the 8th fastest time overall, but went 2nd fastest in their category, finishing some 20 seconds ahead of Ford NWM's Woolridge and Dreyer in the 2nd of the Team Ford Rangers. Outside the top 10, it was going to be tough going for defending Class T champions Johan and Werner Horn in their Malalan Toyota Hilux. The brothers drew the number 1 position for the qualifying race and lost time finding the route. Even so, they posted the 13th fastest time, just 1 minute and 23 seconds behind the 2 race leaders. In the special vehicle category, the going was proving somewhat tougher than expected. The fastest crew during qualifying was that of Van Platzen and Petersen, who brought their Liv Lesotho Chenoweth home in a time of 29 minutes and 40 seconds. This put them well clear of Trethewey and Roots in their Bat Venom, who in turn held a 17-second lead over the 3rd place crew of Kutsia and Sandra Labiskakny in their 4x4 Mega World Porter. Kennedy and Van Platzen were 4th fastest in the 2nd of the Liv Lesotho Specials, whilst Dean Bradbury and Timmy Burtis rounded out the top 5 in their ex-Evan Hutchison Bat Venom. The first Class P car home was that of Nick Gosler and Andrew Massey. And here's a confirmation of how things panned out during the short, sharp qualifying loop. In Class FIA, it was de Villiers and Murphy who matched times with Baragwanath and Kramer. An absolutely amazing dice was on the cards. Larachan and White were in 3rd place, with Variawa and Bedonia next in their brand new Nissan Navara. Visser and Husselman had a good run in their Hilux, with Venter and Van Aert going 6th fastest. In Class T, it was Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable who took the top honours, with Berthold in 2nd. Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer were 3rd fastest, with the Horn brothers going 4th fastest after opening the road. Van Tonder and Redlinghuis rounded out the top 5. Class S saw Heine Stamfer and Henry Hugo just pip Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. by a measly 20 seconds, setting up another great dice. In the specials, it was Van Pletsen and Pieterse who took top honours, 31 seconds ahead of Trethewey and Rutz. Labuschagne and Labuschagne were in 3rd, Kennedy and Van Pletsen in 4th, and Bradbury and Burtis rounded out the top 5. The top place Class P car was that of Gosler and Massey, who posted the 8th fastest time in the special category. And that was that for the qualifying race. As the sun set over the Kalahari that evening, the temperature dropped. But it was sure to rise sharply the next morning, not only in terms of sunshine, but also when it came to the action. So join us after the break for highlights from the main event of this year's Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race.
Two young learners are being taught to drive by their mums. They have one intense week together in the car before they take their test.
Look at the road. Don't worry about them.
We're not going to make it. We're not going to.
No, you're not.
You should really stop there.
It doesn't matter. There's no one coming.
Driving too fast is a real issue for Kieran.
Let's slow down.
Why?
Because that's what I'm saying about being aware. They have to pull out there.
You don't know what you're talking about. You literally don't know what you're talking about.
That wasn't great, I gotta be honest.
If you could change one thing about your car insurance, what would it be?
More control over how much I pay. With annual increases, I can't budget.
Remove the high excess.
It's so unfair. We drive the same car and pay different premiums. I wish the process was easier. Buying car insurance just takes up so much time.
PMD will change the way you think about car insurance. Budgeting is made easy with fixed premiums that never increase. There is no excess to pay and no penalties of any kind when claiming. In addition, with PMD, everyone is treated equally. Your premium is simply based on the car you drive. Insuring your car with PMD couldn't be easier. Just one phone call and you're done.
Wow, that's amazing!
Really?
What? That is unbelievable.
With PMD's Prime Motor Cover Grow plan, each time you pay your monthly premium, your cover grows. Over time, your cover reaches the full trade value of your car. The Prime Motor Cover Grow plan contributes toward the cost of your repairs or loss in the event of an accident, natural fire or disaster, theft or hijacking. With PMD, there is no excess to pay when claiming, and your premiums never increase. Plus, you get 500,000 Rand third-party vehicle liability cover.
Sounds amazing. Where do I sign up?
SMS cover to 43813 and we'll call you. That's cover to 43813. PMD, fixed premiums for life.
Welcome back to the 2018 Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race, by far the biggest motorsport event on the African continent. And after what already felt like days in the Botswana desert, the sun finally rose on the most important day of all. Saturday was race day. The crews may have had a little taster of the 2018 desert race, but qualifying the day before was a mere 48 kilometers long. The Saturday of the race would see them tackle a loop that covered around 220 kilometers of typical desert race conditions. Thick sand, narrow tracks, thorn trees everywhere, and literally thousands of enthusiastic spectators that take this race very seriously. What's more is, the crews had to face the challenges not only once, but twice, as the total distance for the day would see them cover more than 440 kilometers. Fans and spectators were gathering at the start area, whilst the crews and cars were starting to line themselves up to get ready for the 8:15 start. And if the short qualifying race was anything to go by, they were in for a treat. As you already know, Toyota Gazoo Racing's Janelle de Villiers and Century's Brian Baragwanath set times within the same second. but it was the Hilux of de Villiers who lined up first ahead of the CR5 car of Baragwanath. And at exactly 15 minutes past 8, the lights turned green and the flag dropped to signal the start of the epic Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race. After the two cars driven by de Villiers and Baragwanath, it was the second factory Hilux piloted by Henk Lotteken alongside Barry White, and the first of the Neil Woolridge Motorsport Ford Rangers of Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable to venture off into the unknown. The quality of the field was evident just by looking at the next bunch that consisted of former Special Vehicle Desert Race winner Shamir Variawa, former overall Desert Race winner Chris Visser, and former Class T South African champion Jason Fenter. One by one, each of the more than 40 crews took off in their individual quest to conquer the desert. And after a few kilometers in, the stopwatch was starting to tell a story. Opening the road is never easy, as you have absolutely no tracks to follow and you have to try and find the right way. But de Villiers is an old hand at this, and in Dennis Murphy, he has more than a capable co-driver helping him find the way. But even so, both de Villiers and the second car on the road, driven by Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer, found the going a little tougher than they would have hoped for. At the first split, it was Toyota's Henk Lotteken in the virtual lead of the event, 45 seconds ahead of Baragwanath. Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux of Chris Visser and Phil Herselman were rapidly climbing the ranks and were now up to third overall, just a second behind Baragwanath. Visser had the great-sounding NWM Ford Ranger of Class T leaders Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable very hot on his heels.
Tightening the right into hairpin left.
With de Villiers and Dennis Murphy losing around a minute in the first part of the race whilst opening the road. The second Ford of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer had made up a few positions to move up into 6th place at this point, ahead of the Atlas Copco Hilux of Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott. Berthold was followed by the Malalan Toyota Hilux of the Horn brothers, who managed to fight their way past the Alfa Renault Duster of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson. It was still very early days, but the lead in the special vehicle category had already changed hands once. The Liv Lesotho Chenoweth of Stefan van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse started from pole position, but at the first checkpoint, it was the big bat venom of Lance Truthui and young Adrian Roots who worked their way into a virtual race lead for the specials. As the miles were ticking off, the going got really tough, and the virtual leaderboard was practically changing with every passing kilometre. The leading crews were slowly making their way back to the relative peace and quiet of the designated service park in Juneng, and as they got closer, the split times revealed a number of surprises. Firstly, it was Lance Woolridge who took over the lead, but then the Horn brothers from Malalan shot to the top of the virtual leaderboard late on in the first loop. Another crew on the charge was the Redline Motorsport Nissan Navara of Shamir Variawa and co-driver Zahir Baranya. No real surprise, as Variawa is an old hand at this race, having won the special vehicle category many times before, but not even that could have prepared him for what happened next.
We came into a long straight, which was 6 kilometers from the finish of the first loop, and we saw PDM failure on the dashboard. Alerts, lights went on, and we were doing about 160 on that road. And next thing, we just saw flames in the car, in the cabin, and we had to stop. But you know, on panic, you don't know where you're going, what you're doing. I got stuck in the car. I couldn't get out. Eventually, we got out. Everything's fine. The crew is okay, we're all okay.
It was a sad end to both Variawa's challenge as well as an immaculate Nissan Navara. but knowing the businessman, one can be assured he'll be back. Meanwhile, Brian Baragwanath was having his own problems on the CR5. The man who set the equal fastest time in qualifying was having a great race until a small niggle slowed him down severely. This is what he had to say after reaching the DSP halfway through the day.
Small issue making big problems. It's a small bracket on the gear shifting that broke. So we tried to fix it, we wasted a bit of time, we came home now in third. Hopefully we can get it going for the rest of the day, but yeah, small bracket that broke was, so we lost our gear shifting.
Up ahead, it was Malalan Toyota who completed the first loop of more than 200 kilometers with the fastest time.
Got stuck behind the Duster this morning, so I think we lost a bit of time there. But yeah, we're having a good pace, we're happy.
After all that racing, their advantage over the current second place Lance Woolridge was no more than 21 seconds.
Yeah, we're just trying to have a good clean run. It's been very bushy and very tight, so we just kept it clean, kept a good rhythm. It'll be nice and open on the second lap, so I think we've saved good time. Hopefully we can push a bit now and make some back, have a good clean run.
Behind the two Class T cars, it was Toyota Gazoo's Henk Ladegan who came in third overall. A welcome break allowed him some time to reflect on his first loop.
We managed to overtake Brian. Then we had a puncher not too long after that. Then Brian came past us again and Lance managed to get past us.
Behind the leading Class T and Class FIA vehicles, the Special Vehicle Brigade was experiencing a nightmare of a desert race. The Liv Lesotho Chenoweth of pole sitters Stefan van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse came to a grinding halt just 115 kilometers into Loop 1, practically bringing their challenge to an end. Lady Luck also turned her back on Lance Trethewey and Adrian Roots when some gears in their BAT gearbox called it a day. This left the door open for the father and daughter pairing of Katsia and Sandra Labuskakny to take the virtual lead from behind the wheel of their 4x4 Mega World and ARB Porter.
Unfortunately, yes, we were really finding our rhythm out there, and about 80 k's away from the pits, coming back in, it was just such a scary moment, going 180 on a straight and then next minute no brakes, you can imagine. So we've had a tough time coming in, but we're glad we're here. Hopefully the guys can fix it and we can go out and have some fun again.
So a clean run for some, but mostly a rough first part of the desert race, and we're only halfway into day number 1. After a mere 20 minutes, in which the drivers and navvies get a breather, whilst the technicians did their utmost to attend to the used and abused race cars, it was back into the desert for Loop 2, the same 220 kilometers that had already dished up so much drama. And the drama most definitely continued. They say that for some people, if they didn't have bad luck, they wouldn't have any luck at all. And that saying proved true for a number of teams at this year's desert. One of those teams was the 4x4 Mega World squad of the two Fenter brothers behind the wheels of their two Hilux race cars. Younger brother Dylan firstly had his technical issues before then running into one of the special vehicles on the track. Former Class T champion Jason, on the other hand, was also forced to retire from Saturday's racing following fuel pump issues that left him with a dead Hilux on the side of the road. Youngsters Richard Leek, this time with former winner and champion navigator Donnie Starson in the hot seat of the ATS BMW, endured it all. They ran out of fuel, hit an obstacle, broke some parts as a result, and even had to put out a little fire that forced them to eventually abandon the race on the Saturday. Remember, the desert race is the same as two national events with full championship points awarded for each day. Finishing on the Saturday is like finishing a normal race, and that's exactly what Nick Gosler and Andrew Massey achieved. The pair's Zarco Magnum also led Class P of the special vehicle race at this crucial point, ahead of local crew Julio Ferreira and Onakabetsi Samizi in their Sandmaster. The desert was already taking its toll on especially the special vehicles who struggled to make it back to Jwaneng. Additional retirements on Saturday included Keith McInerney as well as the ex-Evan Hutchison BAT, now owned by Dean Bradbury, whilst John Thompson's luckless season also continued. But back to the specials who did manage to reach the halfway mark. Local driver Keith du Toit and co-driver Carolyn Swan did exactly that as they reached the DSP with the third fastest time. They were around 7 minutes behind the bat of John Telford and Victor Nsheki, who lost chunks of valuable time with a problematic fuel pump. This meant that big man Kutsia and Sandra Labuskakny had a very comfortable lead of more than half an hour going into the desert's final day. On the production vehicle side, David Haddy and Gerrit Skidder managed to survive the first half and were currently occupying the third spot in the fight for Class S honours. But they were around 6 minutes behind the wily old fox Jannie Visser, with son Chris Visser Jr. reading the notes in their trusty old Hilux. The Class S field was actually pretty evenly spread out, as 6 minutes was also the gap between Visser and current Class S leaders Hani Stamfer and Henry Hugo in their Toyota Hilux. Stamfer obviously putting his local knowledge to very good use here in Botswana. The 2018 Desert Race marked a second appearance at this event for the Brazilian pairing of Marcus Boomgaard and co-driver Cleber Cincia, who once again occupied an NWM Ford Ranger. The Brazilians brought the Ranger home in a creditable 5th place in the highly competitive Class Ts. Ahead of them, with a gap of around 2.5 minutes, was the Atlas Copco Hilux of Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott. Berthold was looking quick, but a broken clutch had seen him lose 10 full minutes. About 3 hours earlier, the Malalan Toyota pairing had left the DSP after the first loop in the overall race lead. But loop number 2 had offered up some extra challenges.
We went in the second loop, also made up some time, and then we had starting to have a vibration on the car, unfortunately, so we couldn't, especially in the fast sections, we couldn't push that hard. Just trying to nurse the car, just bring it home.
Turns out the vibration was a result of a broken prop shaft, which robbed them of top speed and around 4 minutes, but still, they finished the day 3rd in class. With a number of big names already mentioned, it was pretty easy to work out who the front runners were in the highly competitive Class T, and they were none other than the NWM Ford Rangers of the Woolridge brothers. Younger brother Gareth and Navi Boyd Dreyer got stuck in the dust with a few fellow competitors, but still completed the day with a total time of 6 hours, 26 minutes and 4 seconds. The gap to the Class T leaders was less than a minute and a half, which may sound like a lot, but after nearly 500 kilometers of flat-out racing, 90 seconds is almost nothing. But even so, older brother Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable were happy to have an advantage and finish the day as leaders of Class T and mixing it up with the Class FIA cars, despite suffering from a puncture earlier in the day. And speaking of Class FIA, it was the Red Line Motorsport Nissan Navara of Terence Marsh and Rian Kraling who crossed the line with the 5th fastest time, a few minutes behind the Alfa Renault Duster of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson. At the very front end of the field, it was a tough battle between 3 different Toyotas. On the one end, the Atlas Copco version piloted by former champion and winner of the Desert Race, Chris Visser, and co-driver Phil Herselman. And on the other end, the 2 factory Toyota Gazoo racing cars of Dakar legend and current champions Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy, and Toyota young guns Henk Ladergan and co-driver Barry White. Visser was flying early on, but the popular man from the northwest ran into dust and was forced to drive with a punctured tyre for more than 50 kilometres. This left him to occupy 3rd in the FIA leaderboard with 1 day to go, which meant it came down to de Villiers and Ladergan. Both were under orders to bring the cars home on Toyota-sponsored event, but they were still racing each other. When the flag was waved to signal the end of race day number 1, it was the young gun, Ladergan, who managed to overtake his illustrious teammate de Villiers to take the halfway lead with a gap of just over a minute.
At the end of the day, we finished, just behind Henk. We're about a minute, just over a minute behind him. So tomorrow, everything's to play for. It'll be a good race tomorrow.
Day 2 will see Ladergan open the road.
I think it's always easier following someone else's tracks, but I'm keen to see how it goes.
So confirmation then of the standings in the special vehicle category, with father and daughter Kutsia and Sandra Labuskakny leading the way in the 4x4 Mega World Porter. They had a healthy lead over John Telford and Victor Ncheki, with Keith DeToy and Carolyn Swan completing the current Class A podium. Nick Gosler and Andrew Massey were leading the Class Ps and 4th overall, ahead of locals Ferreira and Samizi. The Ferries appeared on the board, whilst both Liv Lesotho entries of Van Pletzen and Kennedy were at the bottom of the standings, but still in the race. In the production car fight and at the top of the Class FIAs, Henk Latergan will start the next day with an advantage over Janiel de Villiers. Chris Visser was the 3rd fastest FIA car so far, in front of Johan van Staden and Terence Marsh. The Woolridge brothers, Lance and Gareth, were on top in Class T, followed by the Horn brothers and Gary Birdholt. Stamfer was leading Class S and appeared inside the top 10. That was it for the desert after 2 grueling days that involved qualifying and 2 tough loops that covered nearly 500 kilometers. And tomorrow they do it all over again. See you after the break to see who wins the desert.
Tonight on RBT.
Why are you holding a driver's license?
I don't know what happened.
We're conducting testing for cannabis and methamphetamine. Have you had anything like that in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I smoked a spliff last night.
I work in the industry, I'm well aware and I should know better.
4 or 5 schooners 4 or 5 hours ago. He may not be telling the truth.
I thought I'd be right. Super good, man. Ready for the festival? If I get that far.
Welcome back to the 3rd and final day of the biggest and certainly the most grueling motor race on the South African continent, in front of by far the largest crowd. Botswana residents as well as South Africans from far and wide literally took over the town of Juneng during the duration of the event. And while nearly 40 crews spread over the different classes made up a large portion of the field, the 2018 desert race also featured more than 100 motorcycles and quads, turning the mining town into a real beehive of activity. Competitors and spectators alike were here for one reason and one reason only, and that was to find out who the respective winners were going to be. Well, this was a day that would reveal it all, the final day of the desert race. On the cards, 2 more loops to the west of Juneng, each in excess of 200 kilometers. A number of questions had to be answered. Will Coetzee Labuschagne hang on to the special vehicle lead? Was there anything the Horn brothers could do about the 2 Fords of the Woolridge brothers ahead of them in Class T? And was Henk Latergan on his way to a maiden and overall victory, and that at the jewel in the crown of cross-country racing? As with the day before, the flag was waved at exactly 15 minutes past 8. The remaining 30-odd crews were sent off in 2-minute intervals as the desert around Juneng started to heat up for the last time in 2018. At the front of the pack, it was Henk Latergan and Barry White behind the wheel of their Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux that took on the virgin roads of the Western Loop. Actually, these roads were used by the motorcycles the day before, so they were anything but pristine, but at least they helped indicate the right way. Behind Latergan, everyone knew that the experience and level head of de Villiers with Murphy in the hot seat alongside him would come in handy as the Dakar legend set his sights on his young teammate. And after a few kilometers in, it was clear that de Villiers had made up ground, but soon after he got a puncher that had to be changed, leaving Latergan with a little bit of breathing space out front still. The men on the move were Chris Visser and Phil Herselman. After around 30 kilometers, the Atlas Copco Hilux had passed a few of the Class T cars that were ahead of him and moved up into what looked like 3rd position overall. After a puncher and a speedy tyre change, Lady Luck once again reared her ugly head.
Unfortunately, about 180 k's in, went through a 90 left corner and the right-hand side rear hub sheared off at the bottom. So yeah, that was the end of my race.
What a sad end to what was a great drive by the Northwest farmer and businessman. His retirement allowed almost the entire field to gain a position, including the Alfa Renault Duster of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson. Van Staden is usually a very steady and calculated driver, making few mistakes and allowing the race to come to him. The desert was no different. and with other teams running into problems, a Class FIA podium was very much on the cards. But unfortunately for Van Staden, it all came to nothing as he was excluded after the race for technical infringements. As predicted, the desert would claim a large number of victims before the survivors managed to reach the end in Joineng. For the second day in a row, 4x4 Mega World's Jason Venter and Jaco van Aert ran out of luck when they encountered more problems. This time, a broken CV, amongst other things, leaving the young Venter with no points from what is normally his favourite event of the season. It went from bad to worse for the 4x4 Mega World camp as younger brother Dylan Venter also failed to reach the finish of his first ever full desert race. Fuel starvation problems also halted the progress of Malcolm Koch and co-driver Sean Van Staden as their names joined the growing list of retirements on the final day. Others to join them on the sidelines were Jacques Van Tonder and Sammy Redlinghuis, whose Ford Ranger also failed to make it to the end. Over in the race for the special vehicle honours, the fearsome Botswana desert was also taking its toll. The high rate of attrition also saw a number of big names disappear from the leaderboard on the Saturday, and for some, the Sunday would turn out even worse. John Thompson and Marisa Matten bounced back to complete the final day with a good time in their Zarco Challenger, but it all meant little as they failed to finish the 2 previous days. Meanwhile, Class A favourite and championship hopefuls Stefan Van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse were hoping to fight their way back through the field on Sunday. But this wasn't to be, as the engine in their Chenoweth blew just 5 kilometres into the race. Behind the big Class A special vehicle machines, Nick Gosselin and Andrew Massey came within single kilometres of finishing and perhaps also winning their Class P Desert Challenge. But this wasn't to be, as they lost a wheel late on in the race. So those were most of the sad stories from a number of crews who failed to reach the finish. But what about the battles that were still raging for both class and overall honours? Well, in Class S, Heini Stumfer and Henry Hugo were at war again with old rivals and defending champions Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. Their trusty old Hilux V6 buckies were looking a little worse for wear after many kilometres through the tough Botswana desert, but still going strong. And with just 1 loop to go, it was Stumfer with a decent advantage over Visser.
Yeah, no, everything went well. We didn't get out of the car once. So I see we made another 36 seconds on Jannie. So for the second loop, we're just going to try to keep it together and keep the pace there.
Yes, we're trying our best just to keep on the road. Luckily we have a puncture coming in here. See, one tire is a bit flat. So luckily we didn't have to stop along the route.
The overall production car race, as well as the individual battles in classes T and FIA, were now shaping up and becoming epic. In the highly competitive Class T, the promise of a fight between the 2 NWM Fords of the Woolridge brothers and the Malalan Toyota Hilux driven by brothers Johan and Werner Horn was becoming a reality. The Horns started the day a little down on the 2 Fords, but found their rhythm and started to close the gap minute by minute, kilometre by kilometre. Both Woolridges saw the attack coming and responded by putting the hammer down in their great-sounding Ford Rangers, but the desert was about to bite. Older brother Lance was first to run into trouble, a hidden tree stump, the culprit. The contact shattered a rim on the Ford, but after a quick tyre change, they were back on the road and fighting when suddenly their race was turned on its head.
Yeah, just a frustrating day. We braked for a corner and heard a big knocking sound. I think something's broken in the transfer case, the center diff. So we'll have to go back to the workshop and see.
Sadly for the Maritzburg-based team, it was the end of the road for Lance, and it was about to get worse when brother Gareth was also forced to throw in the towel.
Yeah, we were coming along a straight, and suddenly an alarm popped up for fuel pressure, and then the car started misfiring and came to a halt. So I opened up the tank to look, and there was not a drop in it. And unfortunately today we ran out of fuel on lap 1. So I don't know, rookie error I think, or we've got a problem with the calibration maybe in the ECU.
With both Woolridge brothers falling by the wayside, the Volkswagen Amarok of Henny de Klerk and Jaapie Badenhorst moved up the leaderboard after a slow and cautious start to the event. It was de Klerk's first outing since coming back from this year's Dakar, so the Pretoria businessman would have been a little bit rusty behind the wheel. There was at least some good news for the NWM Ford squad. They still had the third Ranger out in the event. The one driven by the Brazilians of Marcus Bermgaard and Kleber Cincia, who were running strong. So the Horn brothers were doing exactly what they had to do on the final day, and that was to keep their noses clean. But they weren't the only ones having a good run of it. The Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux pairing of Gary Berthold and Jeff Minnitt were doing the exact same thing, with Berthold storming up the leaderboard with just one loop to go. He's been quick here in the past, but he's also been a victim of Lady Luck when his Amarok was destroyed in a fire at this very event just 1 year ago. This time, Berthold had his sights on a solid finish.
But you never know with this desert race, anything can happen. So we've got to keep it up for the next 250 Ks and hope like crazy.
As far as the FIA cars were concerned, the fairy tale start from Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer did unfortunately not continue for the talented young driver. We all know he set the equal fastest time during the qualifying 2 days ago, but since then the former quad bike star has been hampered by all sorts of small mechanical niggles, which robbed him of valuable time. He was still running, but more importantly, he's made his mark as a serious competitor and driver. Ahead of Baragwanath, Redline Motorsports' Terence Marsh and Rian Greiling were still doing a good job of keeping their Nissan Navara clean and out of trouble as they were nearing the end of the desert. Marsh was also entered into the so-called Road to Dakar, so the Nissan driver had everything to play for. But perhaps we should explain the Road to Dakar before we continue. It's a sort of race within a race where certain drivers who have never been to Dakar and that have expressed the desire to compete in the world's toughest race compete against each other for a huge prize. Here's Daryl Curtis, a representative of the ASO, the organisers of the Dakar, to explain.
Well, we're here for the Toyota 1000 Desert Race and of course the Road to Dakar, where there's a couple of guys that are bidding now to go and win this Road to Dakar challenge to get a free entry into the Dakar Rally in 2019. So the winner over the next 2 days will get a free entry into the 2019 Dakar.
So far so good for Marsh and Greiling. But at the very front end of the field, it was all systems go for the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA squad. Coming into the designated service park after the first of the final day's loops, it was still Henk Ladegan that held a slight advantage over teammate De Villiers. The youngster has shown loads of natural talent, but the results have not quite been forthcoming. Could this be the race that turned it all around? Well, everyone most certainly thought so, especially when De Villiers picked up no less than 2 flat tyres late in the race. He changed them in good time, but the gap between himself and Ladegan had increased in the process. It was looking less and less likely for De Villiers to claim his second consecutive win here in the desert, and more likely for Ladegan to claim a maiden victory. But sadly, it wasn't to be.
At one of the road crossings, we stopped, pulled off in first gear, halfway through second gear, we had a gearbox full of neutrals. So looks like we're still trying to figure out exactly what happened, but looks like the input shaft went.
The 2018 Toyota Kalahari Botswana Desert Race was nearing its end, and so far, it had it all. Drama, heartache, and action. For some, dreams were about to become reality, whilst others already had theirs shattered. Just one thing remained, and that was the remaining cars to cross the finish line after 1,000 grueling kilometers. In Class S, David Huddy and Gerard Skidder did exactly that. The Nissan Navara arrived back in Jwaneng and crossed the finish line to claim third in class. Ahead of them lay the battle between Jannie and Chris Visser Jr. and the similar Hilux of Heini Stamfer and Henry Hugo. They continued right until the very end. When the fat lady sang her last note, it was Stamfer, who was simply a touch too quick for the wily old fox of Visser. A well-deserved Class S victory for the embattled Hilux crew. In Class P of the special vehicles, it was the local pairing of Julio Ferreira and co-driver Onkabetsi Samizi in their trusty Sandmaster, who used their local knowledge to very good use as they emerged from the desert victorious. They were the only ones to do so and took the Class P honours, a well-deserved victory indeed. The big V8 powered Class A cars in the special vehicle category normally eats the sand for breakfast, but this year's route was tough and the thorn trees had literally left their mark on the field of cars. In the end, the Liv Lesotho Porter of Werner Kennedy and CJ Van Pletsen crossed the line in 4th, whilst the bat of local driver Keith du Toit and experienced rally co-driver Carolyn Swan brought it home in a well-earned 3rd place after a very steady and safe race, exactly what he set out to do just 3 days earlier. But who would take the overall special vehicle honours? Only 2 contenders remained. The Bat Warbird, with John Telford behind the wheel, and the 4x4 Mega World Porter of Coetzee and Sandra Labuschagne. Telford gave it his all, but the time lost due to a broken fuel pump on day 1 just proved too much. On the other hand, the Labuschagnes were having their own fair share of trials and tribulations, with brakes and all sorts of other issues adding to the challenges of trying to beat the desert. In the end, everyone could only sit back and wait to see if the Labuschagnes would reach the end. And reach it they did, in some kind of style.
About 50 k's out, we lost the wheel, and we sat down there and we thought, oh well, that was game over. And I said to Sandra, stuff this. This is sand, this is soft. We will make it in, or we'll drive it till another wheel breaks off, or till we come to a standstill. And we went for it. And here we are.
An emphatic victory for Coetzee and Sandra Labuschagne, who wrestled their 4x4 Mega World Porter home after 1,000 grueling kilometers in the Botswana desert. Telford was not too unhappy about his 2nd place, whilst du Toit was more than satisfied with 3rd ahead of Werner Kennedy. With a late race retirement for Nick Gosselin and Andrew Massey, Class P victory went to the incredible local pairing of Ferreira and Samizi.
If you're looking for perfectly good used, new or aftermarket spare parts for any model of Mercedes and Audi cars, then 4 Aces is your solution. With over 12,000 square meters of stock, we will have what you're looking for. We offer 100% money-back guarantee and personal guarantee on everything we offer. 4 Aces specializes in Mercedes, Audi, Volvo and smart cars only. So if you're looking for the right part at the right price first time, contact 4 Aces today. Now you're sorted.
Coming up, Unloaded. Ryan fights his way through icy conditions with dangerous cargo. Brenda's first cross-country haul gets drenched.
I got too much at stake.
But weather isn't the only thing dampening her day.
You big fat tailgate.
And Joe faces the sting of hauling 9 million bees.
They're definitely out of the nets.
Yeah, they just had a fun ride.
So that was a wrap for the special vehicles, but what about the overall race in Class T and FIA? With so many different retirements so late in the day, the list of potential winners was getting very short indeed. One has to feel for Gareth Woolridge, who was running near the front of the field until his NWM Ranger ran out of fuel. But the young man made a plan and still reached the finish. Along with it, collected the points for a 5th place in Class T. He was beaten to the line by Henny de Klerk, who started the event quite rusty, but clearly got himself back into the swing of things as the race developed. Besides picking up a few punches along the way, he did manage to record a 4th place finish. All that remained then was to determine the podium places, and here in Botswana, it was the Brazilian pairing of Marcus Boomgaard and Kleber Ciencia who claimed 3rd place from behind the wheel of their NWM Ford Ranger. They tried their best, but there was nothing they could do about the pace of Gary Berthold. This podium finish was bittersweet for the Atlas Copco man after losing his car during last year's event, and a clean run this time around saw them grab a great 2nd spot.
We would have loved to have come first, but I think a fantastic 2nd, 3rd overall on the day, which is really a great achievement. This Atlas Copco Hilux certainly brought home the bacon, and we're really ecstatic.
This meant that Johan and Werner Horn from Malalan stormed their way to a well-earned victory in the desert. The brothers ended the day without having to get out of the car, but they had a late scare with intermittent fuel pressure that nearly ended the fairy tale. And what of Class FIA? Fortunately, no late drama here as Dutch visitors Mike Willems and Rob van Pelt crossed the line in 4th, with Brian Baragwanath claiming 3rd despite his bad luck on day 1. This meant that Terence Marsh's 2nd place finish was enough to earn him the Road to Dakar victory. And if everything goes according to plan, we might well see the proudly South African Nis Navara at the Dakar starting line come January 2019.
But the reality is it's 2 long days. We've had nearly 900 kilometers in the last 2 days, and it's really, really rough. But we worked our way through it and we fought back, which is most critical for us.
And finally, it didn't take a genius to work out that one name and one position was still outstanding from this report. The position, Class FIA and overall winners of the 2018 Desert Race. The name of the crew that did it? Well, Janelle de Villiers and co-driver Dennis Murphy. A near faultless performance from the Dakar legend who did exactly what sponsors Toyota wanted him to do, and that was to win their own sponsored event. There it is, proof of the Horn brothers' victory in Class T, ahead of Gary Berthold and Marcus Baumgart, with de Klerk and Gareth Woolridge complete in the class standings. In Class FIA, it's Janelle de Villiers who also took the overall victory by quite some margin over Terence Marsh and Brian Baragwanath. The 2018 Desert Race also proved an opportunity for the guys and girls in the very rapid Interprovincial Challenge to showcase their skills as they put their very fast side-by-side vehicles to the test. The narrow roads proved ideal for these little monsters as they were extremely fast, but the road also took its toll as only 2 of the 5 starters managed to reach the finish in Jwaneng. In the end, it was the Can-Am of Nico Durant and Navi J.G. Klaassen who claimed the victory ahead of Ash Bradbury and Hein van Staden. The 2018 Desert was also a memorable event for South African cross-country series partners and fuel suppliers Total, as vehicles supported by them locked out the podium. It was also the first visit to this part of the world by Total South Africa's boss man, Pierre-Yves Sachet.
Well, my first impression is the quality of the organization. It's just outstanding, everything, inside, outside, and also the crowd. The crowd is everywhere, very enthusiastic, very happy to be around.
The sweet taste of champagne for the winners across the various categories and classes in front of a large, loyal and appreciative crowd. And no one deserved it more than Coetzee Labuschagne after eating dust while wrestling his 3-wheeled car to the finish. Class T saw the Horn brothers on the top step, flanked by Berthold and Baumgart, the Brazilian. And that win for Malalan puts them right back in the title chase.
Yeah, we had a good run today. We caught the Fords halfway in the first loop. And in the second loop we pushed, and yeah, we're happy.
And a dream podium for sponsors Toyota, with the factory crew of Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy claiming the top step that comes with the overall victory of the coveted Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race.
Yeah, very happy for the team, for Toyota, and you know, to win your own sponsors race is always a good thing.
And that was it from the only marathon event on this year's calendar. Next up, we move to a new event that will take place in the farmlands near the town of Bronkhorstspruit over the first weekend in August. We'll see you there. These highlights of the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race were brought to you by Toyota, Ford Performance and Total Exilium.